Thanks for joining us on episode 1469 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Frank Favaro, and I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to embrace the fire in life is key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader. It has to happen internally first. You'll never get there until you change that. Because what happens is you start losing all your top people because they want to go work for someone that is great. And A players want to play with A players, and that's just the way it works. So you have to do that work internally.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In this podcast episode, I interview Frank Favaro. I asked Frank to share with you why authenticity is a big part of customer service and of his journey. I also asked Frank to share with you why real customer service is something we often think we have when we really don't. And Frank also shares with you more about his own faith and his life journey and how he's come to discover the keys he shares. I've got a new book coming out called Inspired Living, Assembling the Puzzle of Your Call by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures. You can find out more about it and sign up for getting more information over at inspiredstewardship.com, Inspired Living. That's inspiredstewardship.com, Inspired Living. Frank Favaro is the founder and president of Serve-Centric Coaching in Cleveland, Ohio, and he's a leading CX coach. With a successful tenure as one of MSCA's top account executives, Frank doubled the national average for net margin, focusing on authentic relationships and superior customer experience. Recognized as the CX Coach of the Year back in 2022, Frank empowers others with innovative strategies to enhance business profitability through exceptional customer experiences. As the host of the People Business Podcast, Frank shares insights and strategies for building strong professional relationships. Additionally, he advocates for industry initiatives like Athletes in the Trades and conducts customer experience seminars designed to drive profitability through enhanced customer interactions. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
Absolutely. So I talked a little bit about you in the intro in terms of some of the work you've done and your focus on coaching and what you've been doing. But I always think of intros as like the Instagram photos of our life, right? We frame everything just right. We make sure the dirty laundry is out of the corner of the picture and all of that. Can you talk a little bit more and share what's left unsaid in the intro about your journey to arriving where you are today and focusing on what you focus on now?
It's a great question. So what's been left out of that? And I think in all of our lives, right, let's give me your life in 3 paragraphs.
By the way, you've got 140 words. Go for it.
Take your 47 years and put it in 3 lines. But yeah, no, for me, I grew up, I was very fortunate to grow up, and I had 2 grandfathers that were very instrumental in my life. And they were almost like the yin and the yang. They were polar opposites, but they both had these strengths, these gifts, and they both were important. And I believe that from my one grandfather, I learned strength and courage. And then from my other, I learned empathy, love, and care. And through that, it really has wired me to have the beliefs and values that I do. And in serving, I was in sales my entire career, and I really wouldn't consider myself a salesperson, but I would consider myself someone who served, and that was the my model for success was the more value you bring to people, the better it's going to be and it's the tide that raises all ships. So, go out there and outserve the competition. And that's what I did in a nutshell. So I would say, why do I have that? And I've also really invested always in continuous learning and trying to improve and never believing the spirit within me I'm always trying to be a little bit better than yesterday. And some days maybe I'm just treading water because it's a tough day, but I'm not going to go backwards no matter what happens. And I think that's also a big part of my journey and story that wasn't in the description.
So when you think, were you raised by your grandfathers, or they were just very active in your life?
They were just very active in my life, and they're both just prominent figures. One was just a great human being in terms of the ultimate family man, celebrated 60 years of marriage within the community of the church, and was the head umpire and the head of the school board, and just all these opportunities to give and serve and to help people. And then on the flip side of it, my other grandfather was a professional prize fighter, right? And then had this incredible faith and spirit also. But it was just that combination. They didn't raise me, but I was around them both an awful lot. And just we're a very tight-knit family. And because of that, I had that opportunity to spend so much time with them. I think we all go back and at least we should do this exercise, really question, why are we the way we are? And take that time. And for me, it was all back to my grandfathers. And don't get me wrong, my mom and my dad played a big role in my life. So with that being said, my grandfathers were very influential in the way I do things today.
And I think a lot of times too, and you alluded to this a little bit, we learn, we take characteristics and beliefs from the environment that we're in a lot of times, both as children and honestly, that happens to us as adults too.
Sure.
But it's being aware of that and being able to sit down and go, wait a minute, that voice is in my head, or that belief is in my head. Where did that come from? Where did that actually come? Is that mine, or did that come from somewhere else? And then it's a matter of, and is it one I want to keep or nurture, or is it one I need to prune and get rid of? Because we have both. We have enabling beliefs, and then we have limiting beliefs that get programmed into us sometimes just from what happens to us.
Yes, we do. And there's been that time in my life with those limiting beliefs. I think those limiting beliefs. So another thing that that I think is important in my story is the fact that I was an athlete, and I was very fortunate to experience athletics at the absolute highest of levels. I was on a high school wrestling team, and we won 4 state and 4 national championships in 4 years. So the number one team in the country 4 years in a row. And I wasn't at the absolute best level, but I was pretty good. I finished in the state of Ohio, a 2nd in the state and 4th in the state. But I was projected to win 2 state titles, and I didn't win those. And I took those limiting beliefs in that for 15, 20 years until I really found my faith, and it got me out of the funk. But those limiting beliefs, I could have continued to just go right down the same road with them, and I would have ended up in the grave and never doing anything that I should have set out to do. Yes, you are 100%. Those are really challenging to rewire yourself in a way that gets you out of that thought process.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up faith, and that's one of the things I like to highlight in the podcast is that kind of intersection between our life journey and our faith journey, and how those feed back into each other. Expand on that a little bit, what you just said about how finding your faith is something that helped you begin to reprogram some of that limiting belief that you'd put into yourself and find your worth. Talk a little bit about your faith journey as well.
Yeah, my faith journey. I grew up, like I said, my grandparents were very faith-driven, both sets, but my parents weren't really. So I didn't grow up with going to church and being involved. It was just checking the box, right? It wasn't really absolutely something that was being lived every single day. And for me, I went through life that way through my 20s and through my 30s. And at 41 years old, it's just, I realized, and I'm just so grateful that I started thinking about understanding, like, there's something in me that is growing, and I'm not happy. And I've been masking happiness for a long time with just not doing things the right way, just maybe not eating properly, or maybe I was drinking beer and just doing things like that constantly that was making me just, not a happy person, and I didn't understand it. And I was stuck in jobs that even though I was performing at the highest levels, I just was so unfulfilled and just not happy in life. And that voice and understanding what was really happening. And it was me finding fuller expression in life, and it was finding God, and that voice just grew and has grown. And I believe that I love Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me, right? And to me, that's like when I have God in my life, everything is so good, and it's just I have so much gratitude. But for me, that faith journey is every day, and it's keeping the eye on the prize and continue to be going down the right path and making sure I'm making good decisions. And don't get me wrong, I screw up every single day, but I'm trying and I'm really working to improve and continue. And honestly, that's what makes me happier. Life gets better the more disciplined I get and the better I do things.
Mm-hmm. So earlier you said something offhandedly that you don't consider yourself a salesperson per se, or that's not, even though you've been in sales your whole life, I think is how you said it. So I found this over the years. I think some of the best salespeople I've ever met will tell you that sentence. I don't really think I'm in sales. And it's, wait, dude, you're in the Millionaire Sales Club. You sold over $1 million worth of product in the last 6 months. How are you not in sales? Why do you think that is? That kind of presentation of some of the best salespeople will tell you, oh, I'm not really in sales.
Yeah, I know exactly why, because I talk about it in my trainings. And it's the first thing anyone thinks of when they hear the word sales or salesperson. There's a salesperson to see you, and you're like, oh my goodness. And there is a negative stereotype with the words sales and salespeople. And those are from salespeople who say it, because I asked them, what's the first thing you think of when you hear sales? And it's, fast talking, snake oil. We put this in our mind. So that's one of the things I love to work with people, is help them rewire that process of, no, you're not a salesperson. You're a provider of value. And it's your job to help people, serve them. And Zig Ziglar, one of my all-time favorite quotes, you can have anything in life that you want if you help enough other people get what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I love that. And I think that's the prescription. That's what works. And stop trying to sell, because sell is me focused. How can I benefit myself first, and start helping people? How can I solve their problem? How can I make their life better? And as a result of that, the byproduct is sales come. So you're a receiver of sales, right? And that comes from the great work that you do to help people.
Mm. Yeah, distinguish. So a couple of words that I distinguish between, because I think similarly they have connotation to them that we forget, is I use the word influence a lot. And I have people tell me, oh, that's a bad word, but you shouldn't influence people. And I'm like, actually, here's my definition. And I do think we need to define our words, because we don't all mean the same thing when we say things. So to me, manipulation is whenever I get you to do something because it's good for me. Influence is when I help get you to do something because it's good for you or good for both of us. And it's the other focus part of it that makes it influence, not manipulation. Problem is that I think there are a lot of sales situations where people use manipulation, that fast talking and that sort of thing. And like you said, it becomes self-focused instead of other focused. If that's taught so much and it's out there and people do it, how do you help overcome that negative stereotype, or that this is the way to do it? Because that's the way, obviously, it's what's in all the movies. It's what's in must be the way to do it. How do you help salespeople overcome that mindset?
It is a continuous process of rewiring yourself and looking at, it's a different way of thinking. It's a paradigm shift, and it's putting yourself in the shoes of other people, understanding what they want and then helping them achieve it. But that also comes with us, and it takes an incredible amount of work to change a mindset, because it's a habit, and habits take time to change, and they take reps, and they take consistency. The biggest gap in life is knowing and doing. So most people know this is how it works, but if they're in that continual thought process, that same paradigm, that same way of thinking day in and day out, then they have to reprogram. And that only happens with working on it and getting consistent. So we get people, and I use it's called a relationship ladder. It's a level of getting from a peddler, which is a product. Anybody can be a peddler of a product or a service, right? To becoming a person of value, a person of influence. And I look at influence. I love what you said about influence. I think of influence also. Influence to me is getting people to do things they want to then do it because it's best for them. Mm-hmm. Right? You're helping them see the value of what the opportunity could be and why, what's important for them. Everybody loves IIFM. We do think that way. Some people don't want to deny that, but we are all me focused at first, and you have to change yourself. Be like, what's the forest through the trees look like? We just got brand new windows installed in my home, and what a crazy experience. And the company, they ordered all the windows incorrectly, and they're all backwards. We've got just windows everywhere in our home, and they're all made incorrectly and backwards. And the company, they couldn't see past this one sale. What's the long-term value, right, of doing the right thing for someone? It will pay, but you have to do the right thing. How would you feel if you were in Frank's shoes? It just had all these windows. They moved all their furniture. They had to get their kids that are little away, and their dog, and everything, all the craziness of life, and then, but no, they only think about one thing, and that's, how much money are we going to lose because we screwed up? That's a rambling answer, but at the same time, I think that it all comes back to service and understanding what's important. And it's not being I focused, it's being you focused.
I'll give you a different example. So my wife was rear-ended a few weeks ago. And of course, we're dealing with insurance, and it is the other person's insurance. And I'm not going to name the insurance company, but to their credit, they took full responsibility. Yes, she was rear-ended. Yes, we'll take care of it. And they're taking care of everything. But in dealing with the other insurance company, we'll call them. And we'll call you right back. 3-4 days go by, and then they call us back. We'll give you a link so that you can upload the documents. It's 4 days before we get the email about the link. And I looked at my wife and I said, here's what's funny. When I call the insurance company that I'm paying and file a claim, they're incredibly responsive to me. And that's good. That makes sense. A lot of times I know people that have this insurance company and have had very good experience with it. So I know they're good to the people that are already working in them, paying them money. Said, here I am, a totally external person. I don't have this insurance. And my experience with the company is completely different. Mm-hmm. I said, honestly, in a way, they should be more responsive to us, who's the outside person not using them, because I'm more likely to potentially either switch to them or go tell people, yeah, we had to deal with this insurance company. They were so responsive, and because quite frankly, most people don't talk about who they have for car insurance in random conversations. Right. Their internal, the people already paid them, they're not talking about them. I'm the guy that's out there going, oh, this has been a pain in the butt. And it could have been me going, oh, they've made this so easy. But it's a mind shift, because from their point of view, I'm costing them money. If it's a similar thing, different example of that.
So true. Yeah, it's exactly different example, but same premise and it's unbelievable. And yeah, our experience was great early in the sales process, but now it's my wife had to email 4 times, no response at all. And now they're costing us money. Yeah. It's going to cost you a lot more money if I don't refer you to my network, right? But people don't see that.
So why do you think so many companies, if you go to an average company and you say, how's y'all's customer service? They're all going to tell you they have fantastic customer service. I don't think I've ever heard a company actually answer that question with, we could do better. It tends to be, oh yeah, we're great. Why do you think there's that disconnect sometimes between how the company thinks they're doing and how maybe they're really doing?
Perception. 100%. It's the customer's perception is a completely different perception, a different view, a different lens than the people who are answering the question. They're not there on the front lines. They don't experience it. They probably haven't went through the entire process of what it looks like, feels. And as a result of that, they have a completely different perception. But what really is a good indicator is referrals. And that's a report card. If you want to know how you're doing, go to your referrals. Your word of mouth referrals will tell you how well you're actually doing with overall the experience. How many customers do you have? How many new customers? And what percentage are referring?
What about, and this is a different tack on it. I think also, and I've been in the corporate world and I was in leadership and ran a team and all of those sorts of things. And I think not only is there that kind of measure of referrals for kind of our external clients, what do you think about how we deal with what I always called our internal customers, which were not just the employees that reported to me, but the other departments and the trade-offs and the handoffs and all the intersection points that we had. I always tried to think of those folks as clients and customers too, that I need to have a good relationship and all of that. And that's another area I think I've seen struggle in companies is looking internally and recognizing, wait a minute, we've got people in here that we have to serve too, if that makes sense. How do you work with companies on resetting that kind of thinking as well?
That's really the majority of my work is that right there, because that has to happen first. You think about world-class customer service companies. Let's take, for example, the Ritz-Carlton. They're just this known, and people think of them as expensive and luxury. And don't get me wrong, some of that might be true, but it's their service. But it's their North Star for how they serve. It's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And that doesn't happen until the ladies and gentlemen who work there are treated like ladies and gentlemen. They actually feel like they're being treated like a lady or a gentleman. So if I work for the Ritz-Carlton, they're going to treat me like they would treat one of their guests, right? And as a result of that, they are going to win me over. This is going to be the best place I've ever worked. It's more than just a paycheck, right? At that point in time, I'm invested in the company and I'm going to go every single day because I believe in something bigger than just a transaction. So it has to happen internally first. You'll never get there until you change that. Because what happens is you start losing all your top people because they want to go work for someone that is great, right? And A players want to play with A players, and that's just the way it works. So you have to do that work internally. And one of the things I do to help that process is we've created it's called the voice of the employee assessments. And we come in and we really assess what is that overall experience like. It's a beautiful thing because we're a third party and we promise it's 100% anonymous. And as a result, we get genuine input from the employees. Now, the worst thing that could happen is a company goes and does that and then doesn't do anything about the results, right? But most of the companies I work are have the will, they commit to that and they go through that process. And yeah, that's where I like to roll up my sleeves and really get into it. And that's the gift I have to give this world is to help that process because we spend more time at work than we do with our families a lot of times out there today. So we have to have an environment that is healthy. And I love doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I often hear companies will say things like, "Oh, we're a family here." And as one of my family members who's going through a bad job situation right now and is looking for other work because of it, and their comment the other day is, "I love my work. I just don't like my leadership." And I think that's true for a lot of us that most people don't leave a quote job. They leave the leadership team. They leave the culture. They leave the managers. They leave that more often than not.
You nailed it. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. They do. LinkedIn studies are showing, in fact, it's almost 75% of the time. They are actually that. Yeah, it's that direct manager who they have to interact with, or they don't like the vision at the top, right? But it's typically one of those two things. And it's so true. And there's another interesting thing. The majority, of the workforce today, John DeJulius, my mentor, mentioned it in his new book, The Employee Experience. And what he talks about is 84 or 86% of managers today are considered accidental managers, meaning they took a job getting into management right around pandemic or post-pandemic, and they've never had any leadership management training whatsoever. So that's the majority. How can you be a great leader if you've never went through that process before and experienced leadership and failed or had some really good education, coaching, and training, right?
And I'll think a lot of times the way people become managers is actually because they're good at the skills of the job, not because they're good leaders or good managers. They're not identical skill sets. You could be the best salesperson in the world and a terrible sales manager,
Absolutely. Ted Williams was the greatest hitter ever. They say he was a lousy hitting coach. So even that. So yeah, they completely different skill sets.
And yet that's often how we quote find managers. It's they're really good at the job, so promote them to manager.
I know.
Wait,
keep doing it. Keep doing it. It's like it keeps happening, and I'm like, what's the definition of insanity?
Do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Yeah. Why and why do you think? I know one of the things that you talk about a lot is authentic relationships and the authenticity factor. And I think, first off, why do you mean when you say that authentic relationships are so important to this process?
Until somebody feels comfortable with myself or you or anyone listening, until they have that level of trust, that comfort, whatever you want to call it, they're not going to be open to understanding and hearing who you are. And being authentic is it's not, to your point, it's not being manipulative, right? A lot of people try to be authentic, but it comes across. It's not in the words, but it's in the feel, it's in the body language, it's in what we do, who we are. And we just have this energy. And most of us have high BS detectors, right? As a result of a strong BS detector, I typically am going to, and don't get me wrong, I'm never 100%, but we typically feel like we understand something about someone over time. And once they show us who they really are and they're authentic and they're genuine, and maybe it's something they give us some truth, right? That maybe no one else would, or maybe they did something and they're like, just, it's fine, enjoy it. But whatever that process is, it's building authentic relationships is, I believe, the most important thing anyone can do to be successful in life. And success is not just business, it's personally and professionally, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're all still people. And at this moment in time, at least, we're not robots, we're people. And those things matter. It is everything. And for me, I was, again, a very introverted boy and young man. And I've trained myself to not be that. So I think there's a piece of me also that likes to show people like, we can connect. Even us extreme introverts can connect. And it's just a desire. It's the will. It's want to. Mm-hmm. And it's understanding that we need that. We need the camaraderie and fellowship and people. Like when I didn't have God in my life, I was the lone wolf. People would like want to move. I'd be moving. We'd be moving our family and people would volunteer. Like, oh, can we come help you move? And I'm like, we got it. We got it handled. So you're never going to be where you want to be in life until you understand that you need relationships and people, and we're here to help each other. So without that, you'll never get there without authentic relationships.
And I think going back to what you said earlier about doing the internal employee surveys to find out how people feel, and you quickly pointed out, we're an anonymous third party. We don't track it back to the people, that kind of thing. I know I've been part of some company surveys where they send it out to the employees and it goes to your email, your work email.
Right.
And they're like, this is anonymous. Yeah, sure it is. It's like, I don't buy it. And we do have to bring in sometimes when that culture I've been part of other places where if they sent me an email asking me about what I thought, I'd tell them what I think because I trusted that there weren't repercussions that would come back because I had seen that. I had said the hard things to my boss and my boss went, yeah, we needed to hear that. That kind of thing. The culture was such, it comes back to that culture that they'd established where, okay, I can say the mean thing or the bad thing or the hard thing and they're not going to fire me for it. And in other places, it's, dude, you don't say things like that out loud here. And by the way, if you don't know whether or not you have that culture, do the secret boss thing, right? You get hired because the employee, about 30 seconds after that employee's been hired, the other employees are telling them what is the culture here? What do you do? What do you say? What are the lines? That kind of thing. We create that just through our own actions and the actions that people observe, I think.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. That's how I broke through in my business, was doing that secret shopping type stuff, because I couldn't get companies to see the blind spots. Like people weren't interested in hiring me. They didn't think they had a problem because they were experiencing record years. When it's, we're great, right? But then when you show them, what do you actually, might think you're great, but what are you leaving on the table? You're right. Mm-hmm. How much better could you be if you weren't losing 25% a year of employee attrition or turnover, and like all these things that aren't a line item on many of their P&L statements.
But employee attrition is expensive. Rehiring and retraining new employees is one of the most expensive things companies do. And not to mention the fact that sometimes it's, oh, you're doing great. Yeah, but it's because everyone's doing great right now.
Right.
And in 6 months, the economy tanks or something else happens. And now all of a sudden it's, okay, now we get the real picture of how you do. You know?
So true. And unfortunately, though, that's when people get started. I think John F. Kennedy said the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. And why do we wait till the tough times to do something about it?
Yeah, my favorite version is the Warren Buffett quote about that, where he says, when the tide goes out, you can tell who's been skinny dipping.
Yeah. That's a great one. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's true. Because, if you didn't fix the problems before the tide went out, now we know you've got a problem. So I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. But before I share that, is there anything else about the work you do or what we've been talking about around authentic relationships that you'd like to share?
Yeah. If companies out there are not really talking about this on a consistent basis, then there's a good chance their employees are not thinking about this. And if this isn't something that is being highlighted, then there's a chance that there's definitely room for improvement. People really don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. So with that being the case, the top companies are getting in front of that and they're trying, we need to care more. Like we have to improve. Or else we just keep losing people and we keep going through this process. Start thinking about these things a little bit more. If you're out there listening to this today, it's just a higher level of awareness and consciousness. And I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day, in the fires of the day, that we lose focus on what's really driving our business.
So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, and I run things through that lens of stewardship. And yet I've discovered over the years that word means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, like we were talking about influence and manipulation and some of those words earlier. So when you hear the word stewardship, what does that word mean to you?
Stewardship to me is, I think it's camaraderie, it's connection, it's relationships, it's coordination, it's leadership, it's management, and it's inspired with a higher purpose. And it's a purpose to we're here. We all have gifts, we all have opportunities, and we should all be using them to help people and to do the right things. And that's what we're here. And that's what makes us happy deep down when we have to look in the mirror every day. So utilizing stewardship and all of those things that I said is, I think, where it's at. And to me, couldn't imagine living a life that wasn't in that world.
So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a minute that I invented this magic machine. And with this machine, I could pluck you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. And with the power of this machine, I was able to let you look back and see your entire life and see all of the connections, all of the ripples, all of the impacts you've left behind. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
I hope I make my grandparents and my parents, I hope they're proud of the person I was. And I hope my wife and my kids and my people I serve and the people I work with and know and always say, boy, that guy always had our back and would do whatever it took to help us get where we wanted to go. And hopefully there's an impact made. And whether that's the youth or whether that's businesses or whether that's out there in all different walks, but it's about just doing the right things and keeping after it every single day for me, and to keep my eye on that prize, that vision for what my life should be, because I know it could always continue to get better. I just have to continue to get better. I got to get better for it to get better and to continue on that purpose. So hopefully it's to impact a lot of good people and companies, and have the things I do every day make an impact in people's personal lives. And maybe it changes their relationships with their kids, or maybe it's something that it happens 100 years from now, who knows? But at the end of the day, I hope to make the impact where when I die, my spirit, and God says, great job, Frank. You knocked it out of the park.
So what's next? What's coming on the roadmap for the rest of the year?
We've got big things coming up this year. We're super grateful for a new podcast that's kicking off with the Mechanical Contractors Association of America. That's all the union mechanical pipe fitters, plumbers, HVAC technicians, sheet metal, all within that world, the union side of it. So I'll be hosting that. It's inside the MCAA, the blueprint for mechanical contracting. That'll be releasing actually in the next 7 days. I'm an executive producer on a new documentary coming out called Clash of Dynasties, highlighting a 10-year series of high school wrestling between two Ohio teams, Walsh Jesuit and St. Edward, and they were 35 miles apart. And for 10 years straight, two teams, 35 miles apart, won the national and state championships for 10 years in a row. So we had the entire epicenter of high school wrestling be here in Northeast Ohio for a decade. And the stories are crazy. The duels were legendary. The cast members are nuts. It's going to be an absolute amazing docuseries, and that's going to be coming out before the year is out. Just great things, getting into new industries, incredibly grateful and feel very blessed. So thank you for asking, Scott.
Absolutely. So you can find out more about Frank over at serve-centric.com. And of course, I'll have a link to that over in the show notes so you can find that as well. Frank, anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
I just say, if you're thinking about your life and what can get better, right? And it's just changing the mindset, starting to rewire yourself. It's worth the work, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.